Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, Finding a Niche and Pricing for It, presented by our expert speaker, Randy Moon. My name is Steve Shalosky. I'm a business advisor with the Collins Small Business Development Center, and I will be your facilitator for the webinar. Before I introduce Randy, I have a few housekeeping items. First, we still have a few more webinars scheduled, so please visit our webpage listed on the slide here for more information and the list of those still remaining. Second, this webinar will be recorded. Once completed, you can find this and watch our other webinars that's already been recorded on our YouTube channel, and that link is also provided on the slide. Third, if you haven't already done so, we encourage you to complete the CARES application at the provided link. There's a lot of great resources that can be provided to you at no charge. Finally, if you have any questions during the webinar, please type them in the chat box and we'll get to them as in the Q&A session at the end of the webinar. Okay, let me go ahead and introduce our expert speaker, Randy Moon. He has 35 years of management experience and 15 as a business consultant. In his career, he has worked in both medium-sized and large corporations like FedEx, and he now runs his own small business, R Moon Consulting, where he focuses on assisting small and medium-sized businesses especially with growth, stability, and managing issues. Randy has also earned an MBA from Baylor University. Without further ado, Randy, I turn it over to you, and you can take it from here.
Okay, well, thank you, Steve, and welcome everybody for joining me, and I thank you for joining me on this. I'll just move right into it here. I think Steve has already given you a background. This is just information on me. The topic today is niching and pricing, and I guess a lot of people would ask, why are you talking about this? Because we're supposed to technically be here talking about the, coming out of COVID and some people might not even know what a niche is. So let me go into a little explanation and you'll begin to understand. Niche, which can also be called a niche, is basically just a segment of the market for a particular product or service. And there's value in knowing that and knowing how it works and what you can do. And that's why I wanted to talk about it. Someone once said there are riches in niches. And I think that it's really important that, finding a niche is also somewhat about being in the market in the position that you want to do this in terms of whether you're going to be a sort of a low-end, low-price player or a very high-end, high-price player. There's a lot of room in between and you have to kind of decide. So niching is about finding a current or a soon-to-be market that you can exploit in a good way. And especially in times like these, if you search, I think you're going to find there might be a vein of gold in your market. And here's why. Well, first of all, let me just jump in and say, this is a good read. And this is a guy who focuses strictly on marketing. I haven't worked with him personally, but he's got a lot of good information material to read about niching. So that would be a good place to go after this conference. So basically, in any market, you kind of have to decide where you're going to be a player. This is a quality this way and a price going this way spectrum of the automobile market. And of course, there's thousands of automakers. I'm not putting them all, but this is kind of if you think about it, Kia would be sort of on the low end. It probably has the lowest quality. You move up the rank until you get to a Bentley, which is one of the most high-end cars. And obviously it's got a lot of fine woodworking and all that. And so there's a spectrum there, and where you decide to play or do your work is something you need to consider. Obviously, the middle area is where most people are and where the most money is. Technically, if this is all money, the biggest segment would be right here. So just knowing something about your market, and I'll get more into that in a minute. So why is considering a niche important? Because, right now, especially coming out of COVID, it's a crisis and there's danger in it. Some people, there's companies going out of business, but that also means opportunity. COVID has had mostly a negative effect on companies, but there are some that are thriving. And I'm going to show you some examples so you can see, maybe consider this when you go back and you start looking at your company. These products right now are booming: masks, medical supplies, cleaning solutions, stay-at-home accessories, something like haircut tools. There's a lot of things that might be related or near your market that you might consider getting into when you go back and assess where you're at and what you can do to try and drive sales, because that's what it's all about. In the last one was about products and services. The home business disinfecting industry is going crazy. Air filtration cleaning, preventative care, all sorts of medical things, and transportation services is climbing. So again, there's a lot of areas that you might go back and find a new niche different from what you're doing that you could actually make money on. And that's what I'm suggesting to you to do. So coming out of this pandemic is a perfect time for you to work on that niche, or to consider new opportunities, options, and to make a move. What you should do is rethink your actual position in your market segment and question your desired position. This is going to be key. Here are some of the questions. What is am I even still needed? You have to do this. You have to ask these questions. Have prices falling, or are they going up? What are the experts saying about my industry? Is it going to go away? Is it down, or what? And what are my competitors doing? How have they been impacted? And what emerging trends might come? So I'm gonna pretty much get to the end of niching just by saying this. This is the time of opportunity. Do your homework. Consider it like you're starting your company over again. Go back and do some reading and look at things. Assume your competitors, they're going to be doing the same thing. You need to know who's fallen out of the market and who's still in. You need to know if if there's a product or service company that you can exploit, or a new niche. You need to strategize for this new market. If you figure out something, consider the risks and rewards. Write a business plan if you need to, but consider the plan and execute. Here are some examples. This is a home builder. He built large homes, 1 million plus, in very upscale neighborhoods, usually with 2-acre plots. That business dried up. Whether it was COVID related or not, but this guy decided he studied the market, did a lot of reading, talked to real estate agents, and he found that the new niche for his area was in homes that were more in the 450 to 1 million range, in smaller upscale neighborhoods and smaller plots. So he changed his marketing. He targeted a new audience. He added a new estimator, and he started landing new business. This company right here is an actual company. I just changed the name, but basically the pandemic really slowed them down initially, but it showed them that they could upgrade their software and start doing a whole lot of stuff online that they were doing. They were basically a brick and mortar building in a building before this. So they reduced the cost of the office. They got rid of the office. They started having their recruiters and their salespeople work from home. And then they improved their online presence and spent money marketing on companies who they knew were going to be coming out of the pandemic quickly. And they've already started to really grow. So there's opportunity even when it doesn't seem like it. On a large scale, I give the example of a what if, and this, Dodge is not going out of business, but I've X'd them out. Because let's assume for a minute that Dodge couldn't make it through the pandemic and they failed. If you know about Dodge, they make most of their money on selling trucks. And so if they were to fall out of the market, there'd be a huge opening right here. And who could move in? Well, Ford and Chevy are going to jump in, obviously, and try to capture it. But Acura, and this is, again, it's just a what if. What if Acura said, you know what, the trend is moving towards electric, and we have the facilities, we can build a high-end truck, we can buy one of Dodge's things, and we'll jump in there and price it high, and just go after that very high end, the upper end of this market of people who want to go electric. And so Acura, not saying they did that or Dodge didn't go under, but I'm just saying that's what you could do. So that's another what if. So to kind of wrap things up here, let me just say this. Take the time to reassess your market. Learn if there's a new opportunity or a niche to take advantage of. Consider it. In some cases, there will be significant changes and opportunity in your vertical. Strategize for the potential market, moves or adjustment, put together a plan, and then execute as we emerge from the pandemic. So, are there any questions coming out, Steve, yet? No? Okay.
No questions yet.
Okay. All right. So let's jump into pricing. I'll spend a little more time on this because this is an area that, first of all, it's the problem I run into almost with every client. It's not always it's the number one problem. It's not always the most profitable problem, but it is a very profitable situation if I can fix pricing problems. Most of my clients that I find are underpriced, even though they put out a high quality product, they figure they have to compete with the lowest end company out there, and that's a losing formula. You have to price for the quality that you're doing. What is the right price? First of all, let me start with the definition of my definition, and that is, the price has to be that the customer feels they're getting the best value for the product or service that the money they're paying. The customer has to be happy enough to be a return buyer or at least give you a good review. And then finally, the company selling the product or service has to make enough money to be sustainable. So, one and two are fairly obvious. You have to provide quality and have happy customers. But number three is obviously the most important thing. If you're not charging a good price, if you're not making solid profits, you're not going to have a business. So that's pretty fundamental. What pricing is not, and again, I mentioned this before, and I see this over and over with companies, is that we try to compete with our competitors only. We look at what they're doing and we try to say, well, that's all I can do is what they're doing or whatever. If you have a very high-end product, if you have a higher-end product, or you're paying your people higher than other people, you've got to sell that quality. Your marketing and all your sales pitches have to push the quality of the customer so that the customer understands what they're getting and they're willing to pay the higher price. Believe it or not, there's a lot of people out there that will pay more once they know that they're getting the quality that they want. So in order to teach pricing, I try to get everybody understanding break even. I think most of you have heard of it, and most of you may know what it is, but I want to go down and go through this. First of all, there are some technical understandings of break even, both for products or services, and it basically says if you take your fixed costs and you divide by 1 minus your variable costs, and first you have to divide variable costs by sales, you will come up with your break even. And by the way, variable cost divided by sales is simply your gross margin. It's another way of saying gross margin. This is very technical. So knowing how to bid or price based on actual numbers using break even is what I want to get across to you. But I'm also want to talk to you about you can use break even discount later in the year. And that's an important thing that a lot of businesses that I help don't understand. And I'd like to try and clear that up or explain it to you. If you have any questions, please just put them in there and we'll follow up when this is done. Okay, I need to move this over. I have my picture here and it keeps getting in the way and I can't see. Okay. All right, so this would be a typical profit and loss statement. Most of you are familiar with this. Profit and loss statements are also called income statements. And basically it's what you see, sales, cost of sales. Cost of sales, by the way, let me clarify that. It's got many names. You'll hear various things. Usually it's just labor and materials, but the cost of sales is also called variable costs. It's also called direct costs. And basically what those costs are those the costs that are directly related to the sale. They're variable because as your sales go up, obviously your variable costs are going to go up to some scale also. Then you subtract one from the other, you get gross profit. Now, operating costs are also called fixed costs. The nickname for them is overhead because basically it's the building you're in and the lights and the electricity. That's how it got the term overhead. But it's also considered indirect because it's not directly related to the sale, but it's obviously you've got to have fixed costs. You've got to pay the managers and pay the lights and pay the rent. So it's also called indirect. So you're going to hear it in many ways, but knowing those two things is very important to understanding break even and getting to, the right price that we're going to get to. So in this model right here, if you do your division for this company who did $1 million in sales, had 600,000 in cost of sales, cost of goods sold, variable, et cetera, they had $400,000 gross profit. Their operating expenses were 300,000 and they netted 10%. If you use that model that I gave you earlier, basically you take the fixed cost and you divide by 1 minus the variable cost, you would come up with $750,000. So You could also do take the fixed cost and divide it by the gross margin, because 1 minus variable cost divided by sales is also gross margin. So that's just kind of go over P&L. Most of you know that, but it's going to be important here in a minute, and that's why I'm covering it in detail. Now, some people, if you go, let me go back a minute, and some people say, well, wait a minute. If my cost of sales is 600,000, my operating is 300,000, then my break even is 900,000. Well, it is and it's not. It's not because basically this company was, did $1 million in sales, so there was a profit. So they actually hit their break even, because the real measure of break even is when in the year do you hit the point where you've paid all your variable costs up to that point, but you've also covered all of your overhead expense for the rest of the year. So there's a point, and with this company model right here, and this is a profit and loss, so let's say it was last year, this company broke even at $750,000. It had paid all of its cost of sales up to that point, and it had paid all of the operating expense, not only up to that point, but all the way to the end of the year. So that officially is break even. Now, if the company had done only 900,000 in sales and did the same cost of sales, then they did no net profit, they basically broke even. Well, in that case, if you do the division, it's the same thing. Take 300 divided by 33.3, or 1 minus this, the 67%, and you'll come up with the fact that a break even is 900,000. I'm going over this in detail because it will make sense in a minute why that's so important in your pricing. If you want to just to test the model, this company did 1.2, everything the same. What is their break even? Their break even was 600,000. Okay. So the important thing about this model that we're going to be talking about more and more are the costs, the cost of sales, however you want to say it, variable, direct, and the fixed cost. Everything starts with pricing. So the most important thing that we learn when you look at this, the original model, if we focused on that, these are the same costs in that model that, let's say that was 900,000. The important thing to understand is this 300,000 is exactly half of that. That means for every dollar you spend in your cost of sales on this model, you spend 50% in overhead. Every company's different. I'm just giving you a very simplified model. But in this case, this company did $1 million in sales, blah, blah, blah. They netted 10%. In this case, for every dollar they spend in cost of sales, they spent 50 cents here. You need to understand that that's the most important thing. That's where this whole thing starts with a pricing model. Okay, so let's do a bid. Let's say I have an electrical contractor and I have a bid, and the bids this work and that work, and I calculated between labor and materials, it's going to be $15,000. So what's my operating expense? An operating expense overhead is where everybody gets confused because it's an indirect cost, and this is where people make the most mistakes. They don't know how to go in and figure that out and add that in. So if you go and you take 50 cents on the dollar, and the reason again we're using it is because we're using real numbers. We used what we did last year. The law of large numbers tell us the truth. So right there, we know we have a break even of $22.50. Without making the sale, this is where we start. Okay, so $15,000, $7,500 for the overhead. The break-even price is right now is $22,500. Well, I don't want to break even. I want to make money. So where do I go from here? How do I price it? Okay, so now let's talk about it. And it comes down to what profit do you want to make? That's my question. How much do you want to make? Reasonably, is 10% all you can make? Is 50% doable? Is it 18%? Is it 20%? Is it 22%? And let's just say that my client tells me I need to do 15%. I haven't been doing it. I want to get to 15%. Okay, fine. Then I'm going to ask him. I'm going to say, if you want 15% overall for the year, then you got to think about this. You're going to need to bid at 20%. And he's going to ask me why. I want 50%. Well, because not every job's going to go well, and some things there's going to be run over, or there's going to be problems. So what I'm going to suggest to you is let's set 20% as your desired profit number. Okay. And he goes, okay. And by the end of the year, we'll average 15%. So the desired profit is 20%. All right. Here's the formula that's very basic. The final price is going to be, you take that break even number that you got, and you divide it by 1 minus the desired profit. So break even was 22.50, if you remember. Desired profit is 20%. 20% is basically 0.2. So if you take the price of 22,500 and you divide it by 1 minus that 0.2, which is 0.8, if you take the 22,500 and you divide it by 0.8, which is 1 minus the desired profit, that would be your bid price. Now my model is meant to use as a understanding of what to bid, and I'll go over that later on. Don't throw away your bidding model and jump to my model right away. There's a reason why you can, as you can see, this is pretty basic. It's a 1, 2, 3, 4, and you add it up and you calculate it and it's done. And by using this, believe me, I've changed a lot of people's lives. They made a lot more money because they didn't, their model that they had didn't always catch the overhead, but or didn't catch a lot of things. So this simplifies it. So again, if my choice was 15% because I'm happy with making 10, remember you're going to lose a certain amount through the year because some jobs are going to go bad. You might even make 25 or 30 on some jobs percent profit margin, but more often than not, you're going to have jobs that go awry. You know the drill. Things are going to happen, or there's going to be screw ups that you didn't count on, and when that happens, that's what's it's going to take you down overall. So you got to bid a little bit higher. So if you use 15%, it was a desired profit. Obviously, it's going to be 22,500 divided by 0.85 because it's 1 minus this, and it comes out to 26,470.59. That's pretty basic, right? So now I'll go over that, or go over any questions you have about that. But it's that fundamental, and I want to make sure that you understand that not everybody's overhead is 50 cents on the dollar. You have to look at your profit from last year and do the division yourself. For every dollar I spend here, how much there? It could be 25%. It could be 75%. 75 cents. It could, whatever it is. That's the break-even model that you use. So now, if you remember a few slides back, there was this company did $1 million in sales, 600,000 in the cost of sales, $400,000 in gross, 300 down 10%. Now, there's another way to look at break even, and that is, again, and I mentioned it, but when will I hit break even, assuming that I'm trending on this number, or they actually do this number? And that's a very important thing to know. If you remember in that model, it was $750,000. So there's basically a formula for it. It's a very technical formula that has to use dates of the year and all that. And I didn't want to put that out because it's complicated, but I can get it to you if you need it, if you want it. But basically, I put it so that you can see it graphically, and it may explain to you. These are the months of the year going this way, and these are the sales as the year's going on. Okay. So the first thing, I put the darker line in fixed costs, because fixed costs, if you remember that company, the fixed costs were $300,000, the overhead, and that overhead is there no matter what. So that's where your costs start. Now your sales start at zero. And day one, January 1, you've got no sales. And January 2, you've got a sale. So it actually moves up on this line, because remember, it gets to $1 million at the end of the year. Your variable costs, which are the labor and materials, or whatever costs that you need to do the job, it actually starts on top of the 300,000. If you remember, it was 600,000. So it's going to move along this line, and it's going to hit 900,000 to 300,000 plus the 600,000, 900,000. All of this money in here is really your profit. But if you look at where this hits on an annual basis, it's roughly September 30th. And depending on what you budget or what you predict you're going to do, or what your history tells you, you can use, history tells you the facts, but you can change history because you can reduce costs, and you can, play with this number a little bit, but just be careful that you don't try to get too aggressive in your cost cutting or whichever way you plan to improve your company, because your past numbers over a long period of time are going to tell you exactly who you really are. The importance of knowing this September 30th break even is really interesting. Some people may ask why, how is it that Macy's and all these retail companies, you go in December and you start seeing the most ridiculously low cost prices that you've ever seen. And the reason is simple. It's because they hit their break even back here. Now, again, let me explain what break even means. It means that I've paid all the variable costs up to this point, but I've also paid the full $300,000, or I've earned all that money all the way to the end of the year. So basically, from this point on, September 30th, and whenever your break even is, your costs are only the cost of sales. Now, if you start cutting your pricing model down, and if you're going to, this will be the time to do it because it's later on in the year and you've already hit your break even. If you start cutting pricing for no reason, just to get the sale, it's not a good idea. You're going to really lower your profit margin. But if you are looking, if you get an offer for a really big sale, and even though it's only going to be 8% versus the 15 or 20% that you want, you might consider taking it simply because, well, it's keeping your people busy or it's getting you work. That's important. But everything's profit above the cost of the sale. You don't have to add in this the rest of this 300,000 because it's already there and it's sheer profit. Again, if you cut your prices too much, you're going to lower your margin. Now, remember, that's okay because a 10% of $1 million is a lot more than 20% of $100,000. So if it's especially if it's a big job and you're considering, you can take it on if you've been maintaining your pace to hit that $1 million and to do your 10 or 15 or 20% profit or whatever. So that's an important thing. That if you have questions about that or you're confused, be sure to ask me at the end of this and I'll go over it more in depth. So let me kind of wrap up pricing. I don't know how quick we've gone. It's gone pretty fast. It's less than 45 minutes, I'm sure, but let's go over this. I'm almost done. But basically, don't throw away your existing pricing model, because here's what I would ask you to do. Use your pricing model first to bid whatever you're going to bid or price whatever you're going to price. Then learn your overhead, look at your past, using past numbers, then take my simple model and calculate it that way and look at the delta. The difference, if your price is higher, then go with your price on your pricing model. If my pricing model is higher, and what I ran into with most clients is that I was generally a lot higher because people weren't putting in enough overhead as more often than not. And the client would tell me, well, Randy, I can't go to that higher price. And I say, I understand that, John, but what I'm asking you to do is raise your price somewhat, meet me halfway, or at least, realize that you're basically giving this away, or you're only netting 5%. My model is putting you at 15%. And that's how I made people money, because first of all, in the end, if assuming that you're running a great business, if you're not pricing it right, well, then fix the price, and assuming that price fits the market and all that, you're going to make a bunch more money. Oops, sorry. If you're not, if basically everybody else is pricing this and you're pricing that and you're not making money, well, then you got to look at two things. You got to look at your three things: your material costs, your labor costs, and your overhead costs. And you've got to lower those in order to get that. And it's basically business is that simple. And that's what I do when I go in with clients, is I look at their pricing, and then if it's okay, if it's comparative to what everybody's doing, then we got to go figure out where they're overspending. And it's either labor, materials, um, it's either the cost of goods sold or it's fixed costs. It's that simple. So, that's what I tell you to do. If you can't price as high as I would like you to do, or as what my model tells you, then meet it halfway or move it up some. If you follow this plan, I can guarantee you will raise your profit margin overall, and you'll raise your overall profit. Keep this in mind. I'm going to reemphasize this. This model is based on how you've actually performed in the past. When I go in, I don't have some, it's not magic. I tell the people, look, this is what your profit and loss is telling me. For every dollar you spend here, you're spending 50 cents there, or 75 cents or whatever. Now, if we need to lower that, then if we need to drive that down, which we often had to do, we have to find ways to cut the overhead. Often they had too many people in the office or whatever. So it's based on true numbers, and it's a simple formula focused on actuals. And the final thing I want to say to you is the model also teaches you sometimes you have to walk away from a job, especially when the only way to get it is a loss. And you just feel like you really got, even especially if it's a big dollar, you have to walk away from it, because even though it looks like it's close to break even, but it's a really big job. Big jobs are where problems go wrong. So you have to learn to walk away from too low of a bid. Final thoughts is the law of large numbers rarely lies. And I've made a lot of companies a lot of money off this simple model. That's all I have for right now. Steve, do I have any questions, or does anybody have any questions?
Yes, we do have some questions.
Okay.
The first question is, do you have any suggestion on sites to review to look for niche markets?
There's probably, not that I have to say, not that I can think of. I mean, first of all, you have to look within your industry, or if you're just looking to build, make a company, that's pretty broad scale. But if it's within your industry, if you just Google, niches in this industry or whatever, you'll get some places. And I really recommend that guy Colin Scotland that I said. I mean, read his stuff, and he probably somewhere in there will tell you. I haven't read him that much in depth, and from what I've read from him, it's so simple and basic, and he's very big about making sure that you're doing what you love to do, because finding a niche that's not within your own comfort level is not a good thing to do. So he's all about finding that passion, but also learning how to find niches within certain markets.
Okay, thank you. Another question is, how would you do the calculation work for a startup? Startup doesn't have the overhead expenses quite yet.
Well, there's two types of startups. A startup, it could be a start, and the answer is a little bit different for each one. If you have a brand new product that's never been on the market, and if that's what you're starting up, you have an interesting thing there, and that takes what I would suggest is that you have to do what they call bracketing, and that is you use your best estimates on what it all will be, and you have to, and basically it starts with what is the cost of making that product, okay? Or if it's a service that nobody else is doing and you're creating something completely that's nobody else is doing. I mean, that's a great thing, because you can really price it high if it's really a great thing that people want. So you have to use bracketing. You have to sort of take a shot after you've done your best estimate, and generally it's best to go a little bit high. And I mean, there is the argument that you can ease into the market by going low and then raise the price, but there's also the idea that if you take a shot on a high, especially if it's high end, you've got to at least capture your money back. So you price it as high as you can and then walk it back a little bit. So bracketing would be that for if it's a new product. Now, if you're starting a company in an existing market, let's say you're starting an electrical company. Well, there's a lot of electrical companies. You have to basically know where to start, and you have to start bidding to win jobs and to get your start and to just cover your overhead. It's okay in a lot of companies just to break even, as long as you're paying yourself a salary, to break even the first year or so, the first 6 months. And especially if you're in a market that's already being served, and you're the new guy on the block, the new woman on the block, and you got to figure out how to fit in. But it's the best time is once you'll get an idea, you'll know, and I could, and if somebody wanted to call me, I could walk and get a better understanding of the specifics. I might give a better answer. But basically, you've got to get time underneath you to really know, what your real cost should be. And again, if I will finally say, if you're charging what all your competitors are charging, this amount, or you're looking at the bids and you're finding out you're losing it because whoever's getting it is getting it less than you, you really have to take a look at your costs, because there's something probably wrong either in how you're buying materials, or your productivity of your workers on the job are not as good as they should be, and that needs to be looked at, or you're just carrying too much overhead. It's got to be one of those three things. Business is that simple.
Okay, thank you. Another question is, how does a company price multiple items that they may be selling? So they have a number of products that they're selling, and they want to. It looks like they want to understand how to carve out maybe overhead, or how do they do that?
Well, it all starts with, if you remember, the very first thing in my model is labor, and I was giving you the example of a service of like an electrical company, but it's kind of the same concept. If you're making a product, each product has its own the price, and obviously, as everybody understands, the making one is a lot different than when you modernize it, or you get it in production line, and then the cost goes down, and that's where most money is made. But the first thing you have to look at is, if there's going to be the first year, or the first 2 years, or the first 6 months, there's going to be a set cost for each product. Unless if every product is the same cost, then it's simple. It's the same model. If you got multiple products, you're going to have to, and you're going to price them differently because one's higher end or got more accessories or whatever. You have to look at each one individually and price it that way. But now how, again, if this is if you've already been doing this and you have profit and loss statements from last year or the year before, several of them, it's that profit and loss statement will tell you where to start in terms of how much overhead load, I call it overhead load, do I put on it. And it starts with the number, just the actual cost of that overhead, and then how it relates to the cost of the sale. And again, if I understood more detail of the type of product and all that, it may be more complicated than I'm making it, but that's how I would keep it that simple.
Okay, thank you. Another question, you spoke to lowering prices once break-even is met. Would it make sense to evaluate a potential price increase, possibly by writing higher bids once break-even is met? Do you want me to repeat it? It's kind of a long question.
Yeah. Say it again.
You spoke to lowering prices once break-even is met. Would it make sense to evaluate a potential price increase, possibly by writing higher bids once break-even is met? I guess taking your chances that you get the bid.
Yeah. Well, first of all, I never advocate lowering prices. Obviously, in any company, there's times when you have to. It's like, I do a lot of work with service companies, and they generally have employees. And when they don't have work, you're going to lose good employees. So you've got to find work for them, and you lower your costs. So there are times when you should lower your costs. And what I was explaining again was that I don't recommend lowering costs at all unless you absolutely have to throughout the year until you get to that break even, and then that's when it gets interesting. And one of the reasons for lowering your costs is let's say if you're going to be in business, you need to be tough, and you need to be not only looking to beat your.
Randy, we may have lost you. I don't know if you can hear us or not, but your image froze. This is just a message to all of the participants. We're going to wait for Randy to see if he can come back to us. He was having some electrical issues due to some weather So if you can just kind of hang on here, we'll try to get him back. He probably realizes it's been frozen and he's probably trying to get back on. So just give us a minute or so. And if he can't rejoin us, then we'll wrap it up. So if you have any other questions, go ahead and post them. And then when he gets back on, we'll tackle them there. I'm just glad we made it through most of the webinar because he wasn't sure he was even going to be able to join us. It was so bad for him. So he was down in Austin earlier. We're just going to give it another minute or two and wait for him to rejoin. And if he does not, like I said, we'll wrap it up. And I know who was asking the question, the last question that he was in the middle of. And so what we can do is have Randy get back to you separately with the answer to that question. Randy was just calling in. It sounds like he's getting ready to rejoin. Oh, I'm sorry. Looks like we got him back.
Okay. Where were we? Sorry about that.
It's all right. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes,
okay.
We can. All right. So you were explaining about the.
I got it. The pricing higher. Well, first of all, you only lower your price when it makes sense. And the example I was giving you to lower your price would be to really compete and maybe beat your client out by matching him, even though you're not making a lot of profit on it. You're still making some profit because you're not having to worry about overhead at that point. So to answer your question, it's not a bad idea if you think you can get that higher price. Anytime you get a higher price, do it. And I guess you're asking because you're going like because you have nothing to lose. Well, you can't, if you lose the bid and you could have gotten it at a normal margin, would make more sense. So I'm not sure why we would raise it unless you really felt like, well, for some reason now I can really raise my price. I'm not sure I would do that, is my answer, I guess. It's better to get what you can. I mean, in any time you think you can get a higher price and you think it's worth the risk for whatever reason, you know the market, you know the person, they're gonna take you no matter what, or you feel, then raise your price. The more money you can get is always better. But it's never a good idea to raise your price just to gamble unless you like you feel like the odds are in your favor, in my opinion. Just make the money that you can, and that's what I would suggest.
Okay, thank you. There were no other questions, so I think what I'd like to do is first thank everyone for attending today's webinar. We really appreciate you coming on, and I hope you learned something new and gained something from it. I'd also like to thank you, Randy, our guest speaker and expert, for all the wonderful information provided today. Really appreciate all of it. Before we end the seminar, I just want to let all the participants know that you'll be getting an email from us asking for you to complete an evaluation of today's webinar. And it would really help us out, including Randy, if you can complete this for us. So thank you very much in advance for that. Otherwise, please, like I said at the very beginning of the webinar, check out our other webinars. We've got a few more due this, or a few more that will be conducted over the next week. And we also have all those that are recorded that are on our YouTube channel. Let's see, I think that's basically it. So thank you again, everyone. I hope you have a great rest of your evening, and take care.